Oh, you can play it again.
That's right. Hey, everybody. Let's see here. Um, Thank you for coming today to the talk about forest bathing. It's something that is a very cool new discipline that's come out, and I'm going to let Josh tell us more about it. But if you have any questions, just leave them to the end, or you could send a chat. I'll make sure I keep the chat open. And we're ready to go. So welcome, Josh. Let me first do a little, just a brief bio so you understand what Josh's background is. His name is Joshua Heath. He's a native Mainer who spent his childhood summers in a tent enjoying the Maine woods by camping, fishing, and chasing fireflies. What a cool childhood. Josh's affinity to the great outdoors led him to his bachelor's degree in park management with a focus in natural and cultural interpretation. After college, Josh worked for both state and local parks, educating travelers about the natural surroundings. He also spent 12 years making maple syrup commercially in Maine, producing over 400 gallons of pure maple syrup each year. Josh ran an adventure-based aspirations program for middle schools prior to joining the outdoor team at the Lodge at Woodlock in 2010. A few years after joining the team, Josh was promoted to the manager of the outdoor adventure program. His passion and previous experience helped grow the ice fishing program, among many others. He honed his skills in fly fishing and now leads tenkara, a Japanese style of fly fishing. John has been certified as a nature therapy guide for forest bathing and furthered his skills and knowledge with a one-week intensive course in Colorado, the best place to do it. Josh's passion for the philosophy of forest bathing allows him to lead the program at the Lodge at Woodlock, which is a leader of destination spas around the world since 2015.
Yes.
Josh has also merged his personal passions of geocaching and gardening to develop robust programs at the Lodge at Woodlock. He considers himself
I think I'm
lucky.
going
Hold
to
on
pass
one
now.
second, I've got to mute. Lost that, okay. He considers himself lucky to have crafted a dirt path. I love that. Spending time in the outdoors, just like his childhood in the woods, into a career at one of the top destination spas in the world. What a fabulous bio and kind of course of events of your life, Josh. Really amazing. So I would love to welcome you. I just want to say to everybody, I met Josh 5 years ago, a little more than 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And I remember that because actually it was my 50th birthday weekend that we first did I did my workshops up at Woodlock. So I can't forget that.
No, not if it's a birthday like that.
I know, really, it was a great weekend. So I really look forward to hearing about forest bathing. I've been studying about it for quite a while, but I know all of these people are interested in learning more. So can you just tell us what is forest bathing?
Sure. The other name for it is Shinrin-yoku. It's a Japanese word that, when translated into English, means forest bathing. So Shinrin is forest and Yuku is bathing in the Japanese language. It goes back, it was coined by the director of the Japanese Forest Agency in 1982. It has a longer practice than that. I think all over the world there's different cultures that have done these kinds of things, but the Japanese have a very in tune with nature and with the forest. And so he was looking for a way to get people outside, particularly from the city of Tokyo, get them out in the state forest, get them to use the forest. So he reached out to Shinrin-yoku masters and said, what is this? What can we do? And he kind of coined the phrase Shinrin-yoku, which in English is forest bathing. And then the other word that kind of is used interchangeable is forest therapy. Now, in this country, I would say probably 10, maybe not quite 10 years ago, this kind of started going. The lodge has been doing it over 6 years now. We started with our master herbalist, brought it back. He learned about it at a workshop in New York City, talks to our marketing director about it. They did it kind of off and on for about 2 years. And then Amos Clifford, who's the founder of the Association of Nature and Forest Therapy, decided that he reached out. And so about 4 years ago now, we partnered with them as far as a training program and became a destination spa that offered forest bathing. And so through Amos and through the association, I have taken some trainings and done a lot through this forest bathing prism. But what I found out is that I've probably been doing this my whole life, in a different way, a different form, not knowing that it was forest bathing, just kind of my own sanctuary, going into the forest.
Yeah, and I would agree that most of us have had the experience, but we wouldn't have called it that, or we didn't come to it with this understanding. Can you just tell me, what are the benefits of forest bathing?
I think the biggest difference between forest bathing and, say, hiking, because I do a lot of that here as well, it's a slow immersion. You are really trying to be present. The destination in forest bathing is the present. It's now. It's not a cliff. It's not a vista. It's not a waterfall. That's not what you're trying to do when you forest bathe. So in tune, I think the benefits that come out of that is that being in the moment. That's a big one that I think our guests take away from.
Yeah.
That even myself, you become present and grounded in what's happening now. The scientific ones, there's a lot of them. The big one is blood pressure. Often the walks in Japan, one of the first things they do is take blood pressure, and they give you a card and you write down your blood pressure, and then they'll do a saliva sample as well, so that you get a reading off your saliva, because that's where a lot of our stress hormones are detected, is in our saliva. So
wow.
they take those two kind of examples at the beginning, and then they have you do it again at the end, so that you have visual representation of what's happened as you've done this 2 or 3 hour immersion in the forest. And what I found, I always joke with my guests, often our guests have some type of a Fitbit on, or they have some kind of a tracker that is a Apple Watch that has their blood pressure. And I always say, if your blood pressure goes up, don't tell me. If it goes down, I want to know. Don't tell me if it goes up. I don't need that. But most of the time, the guests that do it, there is significant drops in their blood pressure. So if you carry that through, blood pressure is going to work with heart disease and depression and anxiety. What really happens in forest bathing is you are breathing in a compound called phytosides. Those phytosides are the natural compound that the trees put off to fight against bacterial and fungal infections. So it's their defense mechanism. It's emitted, so through photosynthesis from light production, it's emitted into the air. And as we walk through the forest, we breathe that in. In tune, what happens to us is that it raises our own killer cells, our T cells. And those T cells go to work on cortisol, which we know is our stress hormone. So by slowing down, by breathing, that in turn usually just naturally lowers your blood pressure. So that's happening there. Now you're getting a compound effect from the compounds of the trees, which is now going to work on that cortisol level. So the studies have shown that a 3-hour forest bathing session, the lasting effects can stay in one's body up to a week.
Wow.
So that's kind of where the recommendation of a 3-hour session comes from, is that we know through scientific study that those effects stay in your body for up to a week. Now, of course, like all things, it varies by person, whether it stays there or goes away in a quicker rate. But you're really working on a sensory immersion. So your sight, taste, touch, feel, smell, that's kind of where we're headed But what I like to do here is also work on two senses that we kind of forget about, and that is your intuitive sense and your imaginative sense. Um, we just don't, as adults, we forget to imagine. We lose that creativity. The word I often use is wonder. We don't wonder as adults like we do as children. So I think children, and that's the other fear, we can get into that a little bit later, is that not enough kids are getting outside, not enough kids are in the woods. So, most of us spent some time of our childhood outside, whether it's at summer camp or whether, in my case, that was my childhood. So you know how to do it. You just work, kids, spouses, life. You forget how to look at the forest as a child again. So I encourage that on all my walks, to try to find that little kid in you and let him out, let her out, let him go. Run wild in the forest, have fun, pick up things, smell things. That's the thing too, is those sensory immersions. Get as many senses involved as you can, because that often triggers other things. And then a key component with forest bathing that's different than other forms of outdoor recreation is that we then come back together after an invitation and share those experiences. So there's another benefit, is to talk about what you're feeling, and not everybody's comfortable in sharing, and that's okay. I always make the joke that I don't turn arms and leave bruises. It's not my job. I usually use a talking piece. Guests are comfortable. They share. If they don't, then they can pass the talking piece to the guest next to them. It takes that awkwardness about, oh, I've got nothing to share, I don't know what to say. Just simply take the talking piece and pass. And then we go into the next invitation. Our walks here are about 180 minutes, 150 minutes, 110 minutes. And then in the summertime, we do typically 110-minute walk. It's just shy of 2 hours. And then in the wintertime, we're doing an 80-minute walk. But I do privates that are a little bit longer. And then my community forest bathing that I do once a month for people to come up, even if they're not staying with us, they can come and do forest bathing with us, is 2 hours long.
Let me just interject that when we were there in January and we did forest bathing with you, it was about 5 degrees and very windy.
And everybody stuck it out.
I'm sorry?
Everybody stuck it out.
We did. We had such a big group of people.
14 of you that day.
People.
Yeah, 14.
Oh my gosh. So I think it was about an hour and a half, and it was like, okay, that's enough.
Yeah, no, when it's cold like that, that's why we shrunk the winter one, because when it's cold like that, you're not moving very fast. That's not the object of the thing. Like, I typically cover a mile to a mile and a half in less than 2 hours. So we're not going very fast. Amos, my trainer, some of his walks are less than a half a mile in 3 hours. I don't know if I can move that slow. No, I'm not sure. That's a whole new level of walking slow.
I've identified that Josh is fire element, so he definitely
very much so fire.
But yeah, so that is really a challenge. That, I think, is what I find when I'm taking forest bathing sessions. I see most people are just taking their normal walk, their normal gait, and it's like, no,
slow down,
and you have to, like, I can imagine. I mean, because you're setting the pace, so they could walk fast and then catch up with you, and then just stand there with you and wait for everyone to catch up. Like, how do you try to tell people, like, slow down?
And that's the beauty of the guide. I mean, that is the importance. That's the other difference with forest bathing and forest therapy, is that the guide really is there to set the pace and help you do what you probably won't do on your own. And that is slow down. I mean, many of the guests that I've interacted with come out of New York City, come out of Philadelphia, Northern New Jersey, Long Island, and they are very A to B. We got to get there. Let's go. And my first job is to slow everybody down. I mean, I struggled with that my first 15 to 20 walks, and I called Amos and said, hey, I can't get these guys to not walk by me. Like, what do you, and he said, when do you do your pleasure of presence? And I said, sometime in the first half an hour. He said, start with it. And so now that's how we start, is we do that body radar. We start in a circle. And that, what I found is that grounds everybody. Everybody gets grounded. They take a deep breath. They let a lot of that anxiety go. And now I can get them to follow me. And then we go right into what's in motion, which is that really slow, contemplative, baby step, fox walk, Elmer Fudd walk, whatever you want to call it. You know, that slow walk where you aren't. What I encourage people is to get outside that normal gait like you were talking about. Don't take those long strides. I mean, I'm 6'4". I can cover ground if I need to. Well, that's not the purpose of this. We're going to move really slow. We may cover 600 feet in 15 minutes. You know, let's go really slow, because what that does is that allows people to look up. It allows them to look around. Because often, if you're just walking in the woods, your natural thing to do is to watch your feet, because you don't want to fall down. So you're watching your feet, you're going along, and you may have walked a half a mile but never looked up, because the only thing you're doing is watching your feet so you don't fall down. And when you slow down, that allows that assurance that you can look up, because now you're not covering 6 or 7 feet in a couple of seconds. You're covering 6 or 7 feet in 30 seconds or a minute. And that allows that comfortability for guests to look up. I've always joked, my normal pace in the woods, I could put a pile of money to 15 feet to the side of the trail, and most of our guests would walk right by it. They'd never see it, because they're watching their feet. They're not looking up and around. They'd never see it. It's just, they're so concentrated on not falling down, and that this is that opportunity to observe the forest in a way you normally wouldn't. I think many benefits in the forest, back to that piece, comes through those senses, comes through that engagement. You know, not only are the oils in the air, there's powerful essential oils in the ground and in the barks of trees. And when we make our tea, which we make tea at the end, that's one of my favorite parts of the forest bathing, following that Japanese culture, is having tea at the end. And often the teas that the guides here make, myself and Derek and Kim, we use plants from our forest. We use plants that we know are safe. We know what's on the ground, because we know what we put in for pesticides and herbicides, which is nothing. So we know that when we harvest pine boughs, or when we black birch, or the mints from the garden, I know that I can use those in teas, and there's no chemicals. So that's always my caution to guests is, if you like this tea and you want to do it at your home, talk to your park superintendent, talk to your landscapers, know what's being put on the ground before you make tea from foraged plants, because you don't always know. Like roadsides are some of the best places to get wild edibles, but most of the town crews spray, and you have salt, so you don't know what's in those wild edibles, and so you have to be careful with that, pesticides and herbicides.
Yes. Oh, yeah. That's a really good point. That's a really good point.
Know your source. You really should know your source.
Yeah. I mean, like, I remember as a kid, I mean, I guess we didn't use pesticides on our lawn, but I wonder if we did, because I just ate grass and I picked leaves and ate them as a little kid. I mean, who
doesn't?
Right?
Most kids do.
Right. So it's like, well, I have to say that we might have used pesticides, but we were stupid. I mean, not only us, but our parents had no idea. I don't know if they probably didn't have this in Maine, but in the suburbs on Long Island, we had the spray trucks come by, and they'd spray for, I think it was the gypsy moths or something.
Yeah.
So this truck would come down the road and be like, oh, the spray truck is here. And it would spray out pesticides, and we would run into the mist. Into the mist. How horrifying is that? And now
today,
But our mothers were like, "Oh, don't run in there," but they weren't like, "That's going to kill you. It's poison." They should. I don't know, but anyhow, that's a really good point, though, for us to take in. So some of the you use white pine needles.
I do eastern white pine needles, and black birch. The twigs and small pieces of the bark. Our herbalist, she will shave the bark, and boil it that way. You can do that. That works too. I just take small twigs and I put them right in my swell bottle with boiling water. I typically do that 15 to 20 minutes before, 30 minutes before we're getting ready to drink our tea, because I've found over the years of doing it now that it takes a little while when you don't shave that bark to unlock those essential oils. So by doing it, 20 minutes to 30 minutes before we're going to consume the tea, you guys, the guests, get a richer taste, more oils in the actual water, and it's not kind of like drinking hot water with a little bit of flavor. It's actually like drinking a tea. The longer it sits, the better it gets,
Right.
in that way. That's why when you boil it, you can unlock those pigments and oils a little faster in rolling, boiling water. Along with the white pine, that doesn't take very long because it's needles, it's a little softer and they release their oils a little quicker. Now, if you want a quicker release than even 15 minutes or so, you can always cut them. If you have that, if you're preparing it in your kitchen. I did this 2 years ago with my kids on a snow day. I made this tea because my kids heard me talking about it, and I had all the ingredients in my front yard. So I went out and got it and made it on the stove. And so when you do that, you can usually make it in 10 or 15 minutes. It doesn't take very long. And I don't measure anything. I just put it all in. And by this time, I kind of know about what 32 ounces of water is going to, the right amount of stuff is going to, I always say it's about a handful of twigs and, a couple big bunches of needles, and we're good to go.
Cool. So we have our first question, and just to remind everybody, if you want, you could wait till the end and I'll unmute everybody to ask questions, or you could just post them in the chat. So Stephanie wants to know, well, how long is the typical forest bathing session? I know you talked about some times. Also, can you just kind of lay out the process of the session, like what comes first, or maybe it doesn't have to be in a specific order, but kind of how were you trained to lay it out to, I guess, give the experience?
Yeah. So, typically, today what I find is a lot of guides around the world have kind of adopted to a 2-hour session. A 2-hour session seems to be what most guides are offering. Where we here at the lodge are doing 110 just because that fits in with our activity schedule. As you know, Maureen, it's a pretty tight packed schedule that guests get to choose from. So, however, Amos's standard is 3. And then I've seen introductions done in an hour. I will tell you, anything shorter than an hour is really hard to get into the threshold to kind of, so that goes into the sequence that you were talking about. That sequence is really going to be that pleasure of presence, that body radar, kind of starting to come in. Of course, all of us do some kind of safety talk, forest, bugs, poison ivy, like where we're walking. You always get a safety overview. And then we go into our first invitation, which is that body radar, pleasure of presence, which is going to get you grounded.
Radar. Okay.
Body radar, yeah. Don't let that mean accent get in your way. Come on now.
No, I just wanted you to explain the body radar.
Yeah. So the body radar is when I allow us to taste and touch and smell and hear, and then when I turn to all those 4 directions, north and south and west and east, allowing your body to get oriented and then find what's pulling at you and kind of take that moment to interact. Then we go into the standard sequence is then to go into what's in motion. which is that slow walk where, again, we've kind of slowed down, but now we're going to go extremely slow. We're going to, sometimes I refer to it as uncomfortably slow. So we go into that kind of a slow walk. That could be anywhere between a couple hundred yards, or it could be even as far as a quarter mile, depending on the trail and the guide, and obviously the weather. Then usually the guides will then add in one or two more invitations that kind of fit their group and their site. So it could be, some of the examples could be, I do, what do you see? When we go to the tree stump and I ask guests, what do they see? And really what it is a tree stump. But some people see an owl. Some people see a finger. Some people see a fish. Some people don't see anything but those really cool mushrooms on the bottom of the stump. So it's that opportunity for me to talk about nature is what you see. And then I pose the question, how many of you would have walked by if I wasn't leading? Which goes into that self kind of check where when you're doing this on your own at home, you need to slow down. You got to look around. Then oftentimes I'll go into some kind of a smell, touch invitation, whether it's sweet fern, white pine, black birch, things that I know contain essential oils that have a smell to them, whether it's good or bad. I talk about smells being a positive way for people to interact with each other, but also with the forest. There's a lot of benefits that come, well, I mean, there's whole different studies on aromatherapy. And then I often go into a sit spot where I allow guests to spread out and sit on their own. Ideally, in a 2 to 3 hour session, that would be a half an hour to 40 minutes by yourself. In my setting, I'm doing 15 to 20 minutes because I don't want them to feel like I set them on their own for half the activity. Why do we have this guide if he sent us away? So I send them away for about 15 to 20 minutes to find a spot. It could be in the meadow, could be in a hammock, could be by a big tree, whatever's calling to them. Go and spend some time there. Then we come back and we share. Then I often, by that time, we're towards the end of the activity, we go right into tea. And once the tea hits your lips, you're back to reality. The tea ceremony is the formal ending of the activity, and then I take questions and field questions. Some guides will have you fill out a survey or an evaluation so they can improve the experience for the next group of clientele. And then some people, I often don't always get repeat guests, but many of the guides that guide, they start to get a core of people that will come to multiple of their walks. So, you know, the invitations do vary by time of year and by guide and by site, because if you get a repeat group, you want to switch your invitations up. So that's kind of the standard sequence. Most guides that are trained by the Association of Nature and Forest Therapy are doing it that way. That is the sequence that Amos and his organization have kind of outlined for us to follow.
Okay. Let me ask you, how many forest bathing guides are there? Do you have any idea?
I think it's in the hundreds worldwide. And then there's guides that are doing it that aren't part of some of these associations. You know, they've read the books, they've done the training, and so I think that's sometimes the fun piece. But if you go to the ANFT website, they have a guide locator map, and you can find the guides around the world. There's a lot of guides in Europe. There's guides in New Zealand and Australia, so South America, and then of course in Asia, which would make sense where it all started. So there's guides all the way around the world.
So the website is ANFT?
Yep, .org.
.org. Okay, so that's stands for?
Association of Nature and Forest Therapy.
Okay, got it.
Guides and programs is the other part, but that's not in the in the website.
Okay.
Yeah, if you Google Shinrin Yuku or forest bathing, it's probably going to be the first or second website that comes up.
Yep, I would imagine.
And they have two. I mean, they have the Shinrin Yuku website, which is really more your first question. What is it? And they tell you all about it, and they have videos. And then the association page is really where you're going to find the guides, the training programs that they do. And then for us, the guides, there's a guide portal where we can interact with each other and interact with the newest and latest information that's coming out.
Very cool. Yeah, there's a lot of research. And I know, Josh, that one of the things that I uncovered about forest bathing and how it originated was, the reason why it was explored was because the suicide rate of Japan was one of the highest in the developed world. Correct.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, that goes back to the anxiety and depression piece, that, and the other autoimmunes. I mean, there's a lot of autoimmune diseases and things that people suffer from, that is so stress related. It is, the tie back is stress level. I mean, we can simply just go to weight gain and weight loss. Often that's tied to stress levels. So is in depression and anxiety, which often is the leading cause of suicidal action, is that people are just very depressed. People are very anxious about stuff. They don't feel like there's an end. And the suicide rate, especially in Tokyo, was huge in the early 80s. And that was one of the reasons that they wanted to get people out in the forest, is they felt like that was a way to get them out of that concrete and get them back to, we haven't talked about this morning, but I know I did with you, and we've had several conversations over the years about it, is that people as a people have never been any further from the natural environment than we are right now. You and I are sitting a couple hundred miles apart having a conversation like we're across the desk. That doesn't happen 300 years ago. It's around the fire pit, right? So 1,000 years ago, 3,000 years ago, 5,000 years ago, we're in this hunting gathering state as people. I don't care where you come from, whether it's Europe or Africa or Asia or South America. Every group of people is nomadic. We're a nomadic hunting and gathering society. We're all around the world. That's what we were. Then we transitioned into an agricultural society. We were there. An agrarian society was there for thousands of years. Then we went into technology age and an industrial age. They kind of followed each other. Industrial first. Let's build it. Let's create it. And that's where cities began to develop, because that's where the textile is. That's where the business is. Then, in the last 30 years, we've moved into a technology age, an age where people are constantly on or around a device. I make a joke. I'm doing a forest bathing activity, and my cell phone is 6 inches from my hand most of the time. It's in my pocket. Our cell phones today are cameras, calendars, flashlights. They're the Swiss Army knife of today's generation. Yeah. And so we have always been a nature-oriented people. It goes back to your book, Maureen. It goes back to the elements, right?
Yeah.
We are a nature-oriented people. That's where we feel at home. That's where that primal instinct to water and fire that comes from those ancestors that we don't even know we have, sitting around those campfires and being highly in tune in nature. And as we step back, each time evolve as a person, supposedly for the better, we step away from nature. And I think this is why you're starting to see these things, forest bathing, organic food movement, because we've realized, wait a minute, we can't sustain at this level.
Right.
It just doesn't work. Burnout, stress, anxiety, obesity, depression, they're all on an all-time rise across the globe, just not here in America.
Right. Yes. And it dawned on me that we, we went from, being totally dependent on nature for survival in our everyday lives
Absolutely.
to now we're not dependent at all, pretty much, on nature for our everyday lives. But it's the longer term that that hasn't changed. We're still dependent on it, but we're short-term people. We just think about today, tomorrow. We don't think about next year. Will we have the food that we currently have? Will we have the water supply that we currently have? So we don't totally discount it because we're so instant gratification.
Well,
And here and now, that's it.
I think that's the bigger picture too, Maureen, is that, especially Amos, if you read his book that he wrote last year, and if you look at his picture, and it's that we as a people now have this rift between Mother Earth and us, where we don't depend on her the way we need to. We need it more than we think we do, because we can go to the grocery store. We can go to Trader Joe's. We can go to Whole Foods. We can go to the organic farmer market. We don't need to understand the cycle of plants, the different parts of what they do, the different medicines that are there, because when we don't feel good, we'll just go to the drugstore and we'll get something. And we stepped away from what has been here for thousands of years, and that is natural medicine. Natural medicine has been around for thousands of years and was consumed for thousands of years. This state that we're in is only probably 150 years old.
Yeah.
Maybe 60 years old in some places. It's very new, and the amount of degrade that's happened is huge, not only in our environment but as a people. And like you said, those depression rates, those anxiety rates, the instant gratification, the video games. I mean, I have a 12-year-old son right now. He's like most kids, he's in that Fortnite craze. And we had a conversation this summer. Don't you want to play with your friends? I am, Dad. Okay, there's the difference. He's interacting with his friends online. They're talking to each other. They got headsets just like you and I are. They're back and forth. They're playing a video game. In their mind, they're playing. Right. In my mind, they should be outside together kicking a ball around, or, playing in the forest, climbing trees, making their mothers pull their hair out. That's what should happen. And in their mind, they're doing it. They're playing together. They're online talking to each other. So that's the scary piece. There's a book about 10 years written that I recommend to anybody that starts these conversations with me about children. And that's The Last Child in the Woods, written by Richard Louv. It's got a lot of press time, about 12 years ago now. It's a great book. It talks about, in his mind, he doesn't believe that we have as much of an attention deficit disorder as we have a nature deficit disorder. Yeah. And his premise, the premise of the book is kind of like Rachel Carson's Silent Spring. Yes. That if we don't do something, if we don't enact, if we don't do something for change, we're going to wake up one day and there'll be no birds. We're going to have a silent spring. Yeah. So his book, Last Child in the Woods, is a little bit of that same premise. If we don't do something, whose kid is going to be the last kid in the woods? Is it me? These guys we're all approaching 40 years old. Is it us? Or is it our children? Or is it our parents? Like, who's the last kid in the woods if we don't do something? Right. And it's really us. It's up to us, these parents that have young children. We're all now close to in our mid-30s to early 40s. We got to get this next generation in the forest. It's our job to make sure that we weren't the last kids in the woods. Right. That the generation behind us has that opportunity and is pushed in that direction as much as they can be. Yes. I highly recommend that book. That It's a great book.
Title years ago. I had to go in and get it immediately and was horrified. But
Yeah.
the first half of the book is extremely depressing with all this research, but the second half of the book with it has all the solutions. It's highly recommended. Yeah.
No, it is. It's hard to get through that first chapter and a half. Couple chapters is. I've given it to a couple of friends of mine, and they say the same thing. It's horrifying. That's the word that they use. And I think that's the point. The
Yes.
point is the shock factor.
Yeah.
Then there's another book by Eva Schwab and Alan Logan. That's Your Brain on Nature.
Yes.
So that again, both these books are written by people who have study after study after study after study that backs up their theory. And Eva and Alan, neurosurgeons, they have this. That one's very statistics and very. If you like to read informational books, that's your book. That's not a Josh Heath book. That is not. There's not enough pictures in there. I need something that's a little more fun. That one's a lot of research.
I interviewed Eva in my summit.
Yeah. So it's a great book, but for me, it was hard to get through.
Yeah. I agree.
A lot like Love's book at the front end.
I'm sorry?
A lot like Love's book at the front end. A lot of data, a lot of statistics.
Right. Now tell us, what was the name of Amos's book?
It is Your Guide to Forest Bathing. Experience the Healing Power of Nature. It was published last April. It's about a year old now. And it's a great little book. It talks a lot about his personal experiences, and it has a lot of the history of forest bathing. I mean, Amos has spent a lot of time in Asia, both Korea and Japan, working with guides and learning about this practice. And he has an extensive background in family therapy and criminal justice stuff and Zen meditation. So he those 30-year works or longer kind of brought him to forest bathing. And in 2012 is when he founded the Association of Nature and Forest Therapy. And he wrote a little book for a little while, and then the last couple of years he's written this book. And so this is the book that he's written. Now, there's a lot of books on forest bathing, but there wasn't a lot of guidebooks on forest bathing. Like, kind of, how do you get into it? How do you, how can you do it? What are the benefits? I mean, the first chapter is, what is forest bathing? The second chapter is, what are the benefits of forest bathing? So the first 35 to 40 pages of the book are the first two questions you ask me. And he goes into detail. He has his own personal stories, but he has statistics. He has a great quote by Thoreau, that from Thoreau's walking essay, that is, I think that I cannot preserve my health and spirit unless I spend 4 hours a day at least, and it is calmly more than that, sauntering through the woods and over the hills and fields, absolutely free from all worldly engagements. And when I read that quote, when I was reading his book, and then Amos goes on to say after that, if that is not forest bathing, I don't know what it is before it was forest bathing. So, you have people like Thoreau and Walden's, his story of Walden, I mean, it's that saturation of the forest. I mean, that's what that whole book is about, is taking a step back. And, there's been other people along our way that have done this for a very long time. This is not new. I mean, when the Europeans settled to the east coast of this continent, there was a group of people that were living in harmony with the forest and with nature. It was here. It's been here. It's not anything that we have all decided to do in 2010, 2015. It's something that's been around for hundreds of years. It's just, we need it today more than we've ever needed it before.
Exactly. And, which brings me to one thing is, we talk about the benefits and, there are so many physical and emotional and mental benefits, but spiritual.
Yeah, I think I've often been asked that question. My one-on-ones are probably the most powerful because in a group, you dance around some of these things and everybody's not as comfortable. But when you have a one-on-one situation, people can get pretty comfortable, and often religion will come up. I had a gentleman probably about a year ago now ask me if I was religious or if I was more spiritual, and I kind of laughed and I said, and so we talked about the way I grew up, and I think as a child I would say I was religious. As an adult, I would say I'm very spiritual. I think I'm much more in tune with the spiritualness of things than so much getting kind of caught on the ceremonies and the parts of a specific religion. And I think this activity, this way of life, if you will, it tends to get a little more emotional than people think it's gonna. I've had people go out with me and they start to cry and they don't really know why they're crying. They're not sad. And so I kind of am like, no, that's what's supposed to happen. And we have a saying in this, amongst the guides, is that most of us aren't therapists. We're not trained. That's not my job. My job is to guide you. The forest will be the therapist. The forest is going to be that thing. And some of the guides that I've done, Amos is one of them, and Christy is another. They do a lot of singing. They do a lot of songs and different things from different cultures, and that's one thing that I don't do much, but it's a very much part of this in certain guides, is because that is a large part of sharing one's experience with the forest. And I think for me, I often say I don't write. I can't write. And one of the invitations I did when I went to Colorado was I had to sit by wherever you were drawn to. I was drawn to a stream, and the guide's invitation was to have a conversation with something more than the human world. So, and then journal that conversation, journal what happened. And that was a very profound experience for me because I came back with a very long entry, and I don't write. I have a very hard time writing. And so I text that journal entry to a couple of different people that know me pretty well. And they're like, this isn't a conversation that you had with the Glacial Creek. This is a conversation you had with your own head. And that's often what sometimes happens during this. We have another class that we do here that's called Journaling for Self-Discovery.
Yeah.
And I've been told by guests that come back to seek me out that when they go to that class following a forest bathing experience, that is some of the most profound journaling they've ever done in their life. And so I think there can be a very spiritual piece to this. There can be a very kind of almost harmonious activity that's happening between you and the forest, and maybe that inner voice that you have, that you're not that intuitive sense we talked about a little while back.
Yeah.
We don't listen to it enough. We don't follow it enough. So I think there is a huge spiritual piece to it. Just being outside. I mean, we talked about it before we went live. The woods are beautiful today. We've got a beautiful blue sky in the Northeast. We're on the heels of a storm that just blew out of here. It's a little windy. There's some ice still hanging around from yesterday's rain, freezing rain, whatever happened. And it's a beautiful day to be outside. But some of my most fun activities have been outside in a snowstorm. So you never know what's going to happen.
That's right.
Or 5 degrees with the wind blowing.
Yeah, on the lake. But I also want to say that conversation you had with the stream was also perhaps inspired by, nature spirit.
Absolutely.
Connecting
Absolutely.
to your higher self to hear something you needed to hear.
Yeah. Well, and that's it. It was written from the point of view of the stream. you know, and what the stream is, and the stream's conversation with me. But when you read it back, there are pieces in there that are like, wait a minute, that's you. You know,
That's
that's
something that
you.
you need to hear.
Yeah, you are the stream.
Ah,
You know, so I think that that was a very profound experience for me. Probably one of the more powerful things that happened when I was out in Colorado. There were a couple really profound moments. That was very intensive. I mean, there were 16 of us. We were all together for about a week. We stayed in the same house. We were in the same environment. We force bathed in the morning. We had hours of counsel in the afternoon. So it was it got emotional. It was a lot of fun. That's the next level of this, I think, is, you know, it's that intensive reflection, self-reflection, group reflection, nature reflection, and world reflection. How do we interconnect to this world? And what are we doing to make sure and repair this relationship between the human world and the more than human world?
awesome. Awesome. Wow. Well, I think we covered the questions.
All right.
Someone did ask, Kimmery, where are they offered on Long Island and when is the next one? So we can go to that website, anft.org, and see if there's anybody in your local area that does these guided walks. I would bet you there's some people on Long Island.
I mean, I know for some of you in the middle or on the East End, it's a little far out, but I know there's a guide in Queens. I know there is. There's a couple guides. There's several guides in New York City. So I would be shocked if there's not somebody on the island that's doing it. And then over in New Jersey, there's a couple. So, I mean, and not being funny, I mean, we're only a couple hours away too. So you don't have to go too far outside the radius to find guides now. I know there's some in Massachusetts, there's some in Connecticut. There's a handful of them in Southern Maine now. And it's just growing every year. There's people growing. I think when we started 4 or 5 years ago now, there was just the 3 of us in Pennsylvania. And I met 3 guides out in Colorado that were from the New Jersey, New York, and Pennsylvania area that were all new within the last year and a half. So it is growing. It is something that more and more people are doing. So yeah, go to that guide locator or do a Google and you might come up with the guides in your area. I mean, that's how we found some of them in our area, you know, down in New Jersey and places like that.
That weren't listed on their website.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, great. Now I'm going to open it up for anyone who wants to ask Josh a question or has a comment. If so, I unmuted everybody. Unless
can I offer one thought? Hi, it's Stephanie. Sorry.
Hi, Stephanie. Yes.
Hiya. The Open Center offers forest bathing. It must be one of the guides that was referenced in the New York City area that I have seen it offered a couple of times this season.
So that's the New York Open Center in Manhattan. Great, thank you for that. Yeah, I would imagine that you could just probably Google, you know, forest bathing hikes or walks, and you'll find some local things. No. Okay, does anyone else have anything that they'd like to add or ask? Okay, well, you can do after this, I'm gonna mute everybody because there's a lot of background noise. I'm going to post a couple of pictures from the forest bathing that I did with Josh back in just last month. So there's a picture of the tea ceremony and our group taking the walk. I think my phone died, unfortunately, so I didn't take a picture of that cool tree that you were talking about. But Josh, you have a pic, I'm sure, because you're always taking pictures.
Yeah, I sneak them when nobody's looking.
Yeah, Do you have one scheduled today?
I do, at 2 o'clock this afternoon.
Awesome, awesome. And just to let you know, the lodge at Woodlock is in Hawley, Pennsylvania, which is in the Northeast. And it is an amazing destination spa. It's part of the Woodlock community of resorts, but it is an exclusive destination spa that's separate from Woodlock Pines.
And we have over 500 acres of property that we can use. We sit on 75 acres. That was the original footprint of the lodge. It has a 15-acre glacial lake. So there's a lot of opportunities for guests to get outside.
It's just phenomenal. Oh, and I do want to put a little plug in for the Mindfulness in Nature weekend that
August.
to be part of with you in August.
Yeah.
And it's, geez, I know it's toward the end of August. I think it's August 23rd. 23rd.
So I say it should be the 23rd and 24th.
Right. I don't think it's posted yet on the website, but wow, I'm just thinking of maybe doing the forest bathing with journaling.
We are. That's going to be,
yeah.
We are. That's my forest therapy walk. That's Saturday. I think it's Saturday. That's going to be my 3-hour session. And once we launch that, then that'll be something I'm going to offer on a regular basis.
Wow.
I'm really excited about it. I feel like it's just a natural progression. We've done these 80 and 110-minute sessions now for a couple years, and I think we're just now ready to go into the next step.
Yes, it's so exciting. And I'm really awed by how much the Lodge at Woodlock commits to the nature connection and recognizing that, and spirituality. I think it's very, I think, unique for a spa to not just focus on the physical and emotional and mental, but to focus on the spiritual.
I think right from the start, that's what this property's been about, is that mind, body, spirit. I really think it's kind of a 3-legged stool, and we really have had it, a nature component. I mean, you've been here, those that haven't, that are listening. I mean, we have bluestone, we have massage water walls, we have a lot of nature components that we've brought inside. The design of the lodge is very small in the front, very large in the back, and just kind of to give you that fit. When you drive in, it doesn't look like this big resort because one level is below ground on the front side of the resort. But when you go out back, there's this large view from the back of the architecture, and we're right in, the name of our restaurant is The Tree because the glass windows look right into the middle and the canopy of the forest. So we've really tried to add a lot of these elements, if you will, of the outside to bring it in. But then we've backed it up with programming, like some of the fitness programming, our guest speakers and presenters, our farm-to-table garden, the outdoor adventure department. I mean, we have a lot of stuff that is out in nature, from the honeybee talk to forest bathing to a hike every day. I mean, guests have an opportunity to get outside in whichever way they're the most comfortable.
Yeah, and I also talk about biophilic design in my book, and it's something that I'm really passionate about. And I do a tour of Woodlock's property with biophilic design principles and point out the different things that are just so mesh. And if you look at their press releases, actually, they redid their guest rooms a few years ago, and I went and collaborated with the PR woman to make sure that, because I was pointing out all the features, just amazing biophilic design. And for those of you who don't know what biophilic design is, it's about bringing the outdoors in. It's as simple as that. So it's the materials and the elements of nature into the space, and Woodlock does it so beautifully, really, without really. They didn't realize they were using something called biophilic design. I think there's a lot of designers out there that just do it intuitively, knowing that that's going to be nurturing. And what's the tagline?
Nature nurtures. Yeah.
We laugh. Oh, Lindsay loves that one, right?
Oh, that she does.
All right, everybody. Before we get off, well, anyone watching this after the fact, please post questions. I will see if Josh can answer any of them. If I can't, I'll post some pictures up of a session. And I also just want to let you know that I am doing an Earth Energy workshop here on Long Island on March 30th and 31st with of one of my favorite Feng Shui teachers is Alex Stark. He's a shaman from Peru, Feng Shui master, and an architect, graduated from Yale. So he's just fabulous. We'll do some shamanic drumming, and we'll do all earth energy connection and dowsing. And I'm also kicking off my brand new online program that starts next Wednesday, same time, well, at 12, called the Divining the Earth Feminine. And it is a 3-month or 6-month course, whichever you decide, that is all about connecting to the earth through nature spirit connection, through dowsing. And you can get certified in the 6-month program. But you really should enroll today if it's something you've been thinking about, because there's an assignment that has to be done before the first class. So if anyone is interested in that, just do a shout out. I thank Josh for spending some time today out of his busy schedule to do this. This is something we've been talking about for months. So I'm so glad we were able to.
Thank you for letting me do it.
It was so great to have you. All right, everybody. So thank you and have a fabulous day. Get out there and enjoy and breathe in all those essential oils from nature. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.